Good evening, this is Donnie Fuchs of the Stop Hayovel blog and the Judean Hammer. Tonight's audio is entitled Rabbis Who Behave Like Pastors. A few days ago, I had an online interaction on Facebook with a rabbi. At this point, it's not necessary to state his name, who has become somewhat notorious for his radical interfaith activities between Christians and Jews. Now, I'm talking about one of the most aggressive proponents of interfaith prayer and Torah study on the scene today. His associations include evangelical missionaries like Jim Garlow, right, and other aggressive evangelical missionaries on the scene today. So I initiated the exchanges by sharing on his wall my recent article on relational evangelism, which describes the most successful tactics of today's missionaries, whereby they don't use the word replacement theology and they speak about restoration and relationships. But this is all euphemisms. These are euphemisms for replacement theology, but they can't say it if they're going to have relationships with Jews. So they want to form relationships with Jews and open the doors, and they've done this very well in the last 15 years. Now, this rabbi didn't appreciate it, and he responded fairly quickly by calling my article silly and lacking an understanding of the complexities involved, and of course by denigrating the Jewish press, of which where I posted the article. Now, these insults, they don't bother me, but he refused to address the article's points, and that does bother me. He even minimized the expertise of righteous converts to Judaism who were once active evangelicals who contributed to the article with analysis and insight. In short, he purported to know better than people who were leaders and activists in the evangelical world, who are today Gerei Tzedek. Now, the greatest desecration of Hashem's name is that in his responses, such as they were, poor as they were, he selectively cited and distorted Rambam and Rav Moshe Feinstein of blessed memories in his perverse defense of interfaith prayer and Torah study. Now, neither source, upon examining the sources, is appropriate for his arguments, which is apparent to anyone who reads them. It is ironic that this man chose Rambam, whose general halachic position, right, giving Christians the status of idolaters, would remove his primary audience. So, in a sense, he doesn't agree with Rav Moshe, with the Rambam rather, but he uses the Rambam when he thinks, in this one particular point, he thinks by distorting it that it gives merit to his position. But the Rambam wouldn't even allow. How could there be an interfaith Tanakh study session in Knesset if we, while we're in control and in power today and are not under the subjugation of non-Jews, how could they even be in Knesset? How could they be in Eretz Yisrael? These people Rambam would consider idolaters. And then, of course, he cites Rav Moshe, a famous tshuva. He distorts it. Whose approach, it should be noted, on interfaith matters was even stronger than Rav Soloveitchik's, whose famous principled position was articulated in Confrontation, the famous essay. Now, the Rambam, if we should go back to the Rambam, where he's referring to giving over Torah ideas, teaching Torah to Christians, he's clearly referring to the lack of a theological danger, as he notes, as it applies to teaching a Christian in this time when dealing with teaching, because he was not dealing with the kind of evangelicals we have today. He said it doesn't represent any danger. What's the worst that happens? He either accepts it or he doesn't accept it. These are not people who are drawing closer or the potential for them drawing closer to Hashem, right? These are not Noachites. These are not people interested in becoming Noachites. Certainly not Jews. They're not even interested in becoming on a process. They're not on a search, right? They want, what do evangelicals who study Torah? They want to grow familiar with Jewish concepts as understood by Jews. And that's where the Yeshiva for the Nations, that's where Root Source and other like-minded programs, that's where people who are involved in these kind of endeavors are aiding the missionaries by teaching them how to be more Jewish, right? So now, so as I noted, it's a very dangerous thing when he's taking these sources, right? And he's distorting them in such an egregious manner, which have nothing to do with the concepts as articulated by, say, Rav Moshe Feinstein in modern times or the Rambam in olden times, right? Now, this Chillul Hashem must end. Now, what is it? It's a quest of too many Jews for power, profit. They're paid well, many of them quite well, Thanks to their unbridled pride, they are aiding our spiritual enemies. Evangelicals, as I noted in that article, they are all missionaries. That is the nature of an evangelical. Those Jews who perpetuate the stupidity, the nonsense, the myth of non-missionizing evangelicals, it's an absurdity, if ever there was one, will have to answer to God for their sins against the Jewish people, because Esav is a wolf devouring the sheep, and for the first time in history, they are being aided by men who bear the title Orthodox rabbis. Have a good evening. This is Donnie Fuchs. Good evening. This is Donnie Fuchs of the Stop Hayovel blog and the Judean Hammer. Tonight's audio is entitled Rabbis Who Behave Like Pastors.